Hello, and welcome to the Trinity Verve Lookout Show.
I'm Tomer. I'm a student for history from Israel, an anarchist, um, and a political activist.
Where are you now, and what's the feeling like there?
I'm in a neighborhood named Hadar in Haifa, which is a mixed city in north of Israel. And in the last 2 weeks, it's been kind of ups and downs in this city. We started with, I'll get into that, I think, more deep into the interview, but we started these 2 weeks with great police brutality against Palestinian protests in the city, that followed by some great amounts that we have never seen before in Haifa of right-wing fundamentalist violence against Palestinians that living in the city, which was backed by and unstopped by the police and the national security uh, ministries that work in the city. And in the last week, things kind of mellowed down. There was a great, one big Palestinian protest in the middle of Hadar, actually in the connection between Hadar and Wadi Nisnas, which is a historical Palestinian neighborhood that the Palestinians that remained here in 48 was gathered in and directed into in after the Nakba and after the foundation of Israel. And and that protest succeeded to happen without police brutality, without dismantling it by Israel's security forces. And since then, the situation in Haifa kind of circled back to the status quo, which is certainly better than anywhere else in the country, because we have um, common Jewish Palestinians active economic and social life happening in the city, but isn't the thing we are wishing for of uh, that would be possible only with some Palestinian sovereignty, um, even if it's yeah.
So you said there was some fundamentalist violence. Um, what do you, if you were going to point to an organization or a group of any kind that was responsible for this fundamentalist violence, who would you say it was?
It's hard to point it out specifically because there are a lot of influencing forces inside what we call the Jewish terrorism groups. Um, but in the central of in other regions of Israel around Jerusalem, mostly the groups have a more united and organized front from that is made of some NGOs that help all the legal legal side of the organization of getting Jewish terrorists, Jewish violence teens or violence fundamentalists out of prison, out of trouble from the law, and is are and the youth are gathered by some kind of non-organized or partly organized groups of Jewish supremacy that take the legal part of their activity and put it on the front as as kind of a shield of that organization, and all the violent and illegal and terrorist activities happen without without the symbols of organizations, and get so-called renounced by the leaders of this organization. But we see the hands. We know that the same hands that that help those people out of trouble, also spirits, flaming the spirits that makes the violence happen originally. What's interesting now is that those forces haven't really broken out and gotten out of Jerusalem before as a center of these kind of activities. Haifa, what happens in Haifa is more alarming, in my opinion, or in my feeling, because the feeling was that those kind of violent acts happened in some kind of a mix of spontaneity, spontaneous acts of violence, of terrorism, of I know a lot of Palestinians that was frightened and had to hide in their homes in the city of Haifa. This is total breaking of the status quo. It's something that haven't happened before.
Yeah, because Haifa is a mixed community that's been long known as a safe place for Palestinians, right?
Yeah, it's of course there's a lot of influence of the Israeli occupation and Israeli apartheid in Haifa, but it remained only from the like an outside force acting on Haifa from the rest of the municipalities of Israel, and Haifa remained as somewhat of we can do a common life center for Jews, Palestinians who just want to live and work and raise families and go out for a beer together and living life together. And of course, there was a lot of the Zionist action and the occupation and the apartheid and the poverty, inequalities of rates and all the systematic racism that we know acting on national minority societies swollen inside of colonialist forces country. But Haifa never been the heart of fundamentalist violence, as we've seen the last 2 weeks, in mostly of last week. And that's half of it. Half of it was spontaneous and very alarming, and half of it was actually really imported from Jerusalem, not in theory, but in buses.
Really?
Yeah, there was some Telegram, some fundamentalist organizations working through on the platform of Telegram. For which some screenshots of the communication there was leaked to the media and circled through social networks, that reveals that there was some organized forces that actually made Jewish fundamentalists go into mixed city and plant frightened terror inside.
Do you feel like there's been much fighting there, or has it been more like group-based terrorism rather than like an actual army, state-sponsored terrorism?
I don't think the state does not fund this terrorism directly, and in every formal way is condemning this kind of acts. But of course, that the actual system will enable those kind of activities more that it enables, and it's not of course, it's really depressing. But the fact is that there is an environment of enabling rather than celebrating those kind of activities. The one hand is condemning, and the other hand is enabling it. While at the same time, Palestinians, both outside of Israel's sovereignty land, obviously, but inside of mainland Israel, of like Haifa, Palestinians are running into and tackled by violent military and violent police brutality, and not allowing even peaceful demonstrations to happen because of this national fright and this dehumanization and delegitimation of any kind of pro-Palestinian or national Palestinian symbols, like the Palestinian flags, which was the main reason that the police spokespersons and ministry of the police actually said that there was violence in the protests because of the Palestinian flags. And the Palestinian flag is just a flag, but the Jewish terrorists that came by to Haifa from Jerusalem in buses and went there down and broke into Palestinian houses while the police was there, and we seen videos, they're not acting the same way that they act when the peaceful protest of the Palestinians happened 2 days earlier. There is a feeling of enabling.
Right.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, you mean like whenever these let's call them terrorists, these fundamentalist terrorists come in to your city, they're not being disrupted by police the same force that peaceful protesters from Palestine are, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot in the US with Proud Boys and Black Lives Matter. Do you think mixed groups of Palestinians and Jews are going to be targeted and are in danger?
Do you mean mixed groups of Palestinians and Israelis?
Like in your city?
I don't think it's the main focus, mostly because it's not as common as the separationist groups. And I think the separationist groups having more time fighting, like that the public fight is between Jewish fundamentalists and what they call Palestinian fundamentalists.
You feel like it's a fair term?
The common, I think you can be a fundamentalist about a lot of things. I don't think, but I think that the way that mostly people will use the term Palestinian fundamentalist is unfair and unequal to the way to the things that a Jewish person has to do to be called a Jewish fundamentalist. I don't think that people that raise Palestinian flags and protest for Palestinian sovereignty are fundamentalists, and I don't think even that, and this won't be a popular opinion, but there's not a symmetry between fighting and tackling Israeli military or police force, or people who are direct paid representatives of a state, between going into civil residences of Palestinians and Palestinian residents and neighborhoods, and planting terror and fright among them. So in that way, there's not much symmetry. Of course, that I think that I want to say I condemn any harm or acts of violence against unharmful citizens, civilian citizens of any nationality of any kind, and that I think should be said. I think that the Israeli government, the Israeli state, has the major responsibility and the major responsibility in any political situation in the region right now, because for the last 70 years, it's been the most powerful political factor and economic factor, military factor in the region.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever Israeli government will want to do, it will be able to do.
So what do you think, in your words, led to this conflict?
Of course, this is not separated conflict from any other conflict that makes the Israeli-Palestinian conflict that's been going on for at least 73 years. Some people will say much earlier. But this specific war, this specific kind of awakening in the region between Gaza and Israel is awakened and is a direct causality of some strategic, very diplomatic strategic decisions that the Israeli government made 2-3 weeks ago. And I don't know, because I'm saying it. I'm saying it hesitantly because I don't know, and none of us will know until the revealing of protocols much later in history, in time. We won't know for sure what was the real cause of that, in the eyes of Israeli government, to go into this kind of war. A lot of it, and again, we don't know, but a lot of it, there's a lot of speculations that this happened because of Netanyahu's personal political state, which is very fragile at the moment, and this war actually really helped his popularity and his chances in the upcoming elections that will follow because of unsuccessful coalition making process. But the causes, the events that happened before the events that after that the fighting followed was firstly the upcoming deportation of families, of 2 families that live in Sheikh Jarrah, which is a Palestinian neighborhood in the east of Jerusalem, that the same group of Jewish fundamentalists, which talked about earlier, is working in the last 30 years of slowly ethnic cleansing of area, in the fantasy of all Jewish Jerusalem, and of reading of Palestinian people as a whole, as a subject, and those and there was about to be a deportation of 2 families from Sheikh Jarrah. Upon them, there was an appeal made to the Higher Court of Israel, and the Higher Court postponed the appeal for 2 months after the upcoming deportation, which means that the deportation had happened without any without any right for civil legal procedure. And that was the first trigger for the events that followed. And the second one was it took place in two Saturdays ago in Laylat al-Qadr, which is the most holy night of Ramadan month, just in the week before Eid al-Fitr. And this is the main night for prayer in the Ramadan, which of course has a big prayer in Harba, in the central mosque, on top of
right.
rock, yeah, in main mosque in Jerusalem, which yeah, in the middle.
The third holiest site in
the fourth holy site in the Muslim religion, and which is placed right on top of the most holy place in the Jewish religion, which is the western wall of the great synagogue, the great second synagogue. And
wasn't it burned down?
The western wall or the mosque?
The mosque.
No, the mosque wasn't burned down, but there was in the middle of a prayer, there was a peaceful protest outside of a mosque, in the entrance of a mosque, and the protest, which may have there's some claims that there was some throwing rocks against the police, or some claims that that didn't happen till later. I really don't know, but the thing is that Israel overacted. The police forces in the situation. That's the most definitive thing in that situation, that there was a major overacting over this. In this incident, a lot of people got injured. There was blasting of shock grenades inside of a mosque, like from outside of a mosque to inside of a mosque, while there was hundreds of people praying in it. And of course, when we're gonna throw shock grenades into the most holy and most tense holy place in the area, there will be some repercussions. And this, the background of all this situation is that the Palestinian elections that was about to happen around this time got postponed after 15 years without elections. The last time that there was elections in Gaza and in the West Bank for the Palestinian municipality was 15 years ago. And Hamas is this time, of course, trying again to run for the presidency of Palestinian municipality. And Abu Mazen's party, Fatah, is split it up into 3 different sections in the last months, and that's why there was some claimed collaboration between Abu Mazen and Israel to postpone these elections. And this also made a lot of, is a great trigger for pressure inside of a region, because of course, people who has no sovereignty and want to elect the representatives after 15 years without elections, which means that people that was 18 in the last election and didn't vote now are 33 years old and haven't voted yet. There will be some anger.
Right. What do you think the American president's impact on Benjamin Netanyahu, what do you think the impact of his comments were on Benjamin's willingness to fight and his current popularity? And maybe what do you think he could have done differently?
I think that Biden's comments actually raised Netanyahu's popularity because in Israel there's a great voice of um, a part of a Jewish supremacy vibes is to be that Israel is also has a supremacy over the United States because the Napoleon syndrome doesn't stop there. And a lot of people like it when Netanyahu is fighting with the president of the United States and like making him seem kind of pathetic because Biden is standing and saying let's talk, and Netanyahu is ignoring him completely. But of course, that Biden's, but I think that's because Netanyahu is actually called Biden's bluff in some way. I think that Biden doesn't want to upset Netanyahu because he does, or to harm the relationship with Israel because Biden's political situation in the United States is, I think, relying on this, and this is my view from Israel. I'm not an American citizen. I don't dwell inside and from American politics, but I think that that Netanyahu knows that Biden doesn't want to fight Israel publicly, but he wants to be this moderate Uncle Joe that calms the area and not making more tension than has to. But I got to say that Biden has all the cards and all the ways to immediately make Israel do whatever he wants, more or less, because Israel military funding is heavily dependent on the help of the US funding that goes to Israel. And even more of that, I want to recall a comment of Noam Chomsky from an interview he had some months ago when Biden just got elected. And Chomsky pointed out that the most pressurable thing that the thing that Americans can do that will most press Israel and will mostly get Biden to interfere in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the fact of Israel's nuclear weapons, which got validated. Everybody knows that Israel has nuclear weapons, but it got them not without the approval of the United States, without the approval of the UN, and there's no real inspections that has been done on Israel nuclear power. And that can be a great leverage on Biden by Chomsky, which I believe truly, which
Yeah, that's really something. I think Israel's the only power in the Middle East that has full-on nuclear capabilities at this time, right?
Yes, to our knowledge, yes. And look what the US had made in Iraq over some claims that was after the inspectors told that wasn't any nuclear weapons that found in Iraq. So Israel has definite proof of nuclear weapons. We don't know. Nobody knows how much nuclear weapons there are. And yet Israel continues to get the protection and the escort and the founding of the American government.
what's the status of Hamas and other resistance groups right now?
First, I want to start with saying that I'm not an Arabic speaker, which makes really knowing and
Mm-hmm.
really giving I can't give a complete or even a really precise picture of the politics inside Gaza or inside the West Bank right now. I can tell you about a survey that happened took place 3 months before the separation of Fatah, the party of Abu Mazen, the current president of Palestinian municipality, that showed that Hamas is second to Fatah, that Fatah is currently, like three months ago, Fatah was on the lead to the Palestinian government, to the Palestinian presidency and the parliament. And after the separation of the parties, there was great. It was pretty clear that Fatah couldn't get the presidency and the parliament, and that is why the Abu Mazen acted to postpone the elections. And I guess that today Hamas is actually gained from that last fighting ground, because Abu Mazen, I can tell you from the relations between Israel and Abu Mazen, or Israel and Hamas, because this is the viewpoint that I get exposed to, not to life inside Gaza or inside the West Bank, but Israel's been making Abu Mazen look petty for the last 15 years. For the last 15 years, Abu Mazen is kept a strict and really never stopped saying that he wants to sit with Israel for negotiations and to sit for finding a permanent, peaceful solution for the conflict. And meanwhile, Israel has denied that again and again. Actually, the last negotiations that Israel sent a representative for with the Palestinian ministry happened in 2009. And yeah, and that's why Abu Mazen's, that's part of the reason. There's a lot of other reasons that Abu Mazen has failed a lot of Palestinians in his presidency. But Hamas is keeping a strong view, a strong public opinion, of stability and resistance to the Israeli forces, because of a fighting from. There are a symbol. They are a symbol of a strong resistance. Even though that, you know, Hamas is a reactionary, homophobic, deeply fanatic party and organization, but in the deprivation of Gaza, in the situation of Gaza, but with all the great things, with all the oppression of Gaza, by Israel, the limitation of transfer of produce, and the limitation of building in Gaza. Actually, to this day, the Israeli military is managing the building permits in Gaza, which is really crazy when you think about it. And with all that dire situation, unemployment, of course, Hamas can build itself
as the only plausible, as the only reasonable, or the only group that can actually defend Gaza against Israel. But it's also because of its totalitarianism factors represses any other kind of civil protests. The last 2 years ago, there was a peaceful demonstration arranged outside of border between Gaza and Israel by Palestinian artists and intellectuals, and those demonstrations got answered by the Israeli military by random bombing, and a lot of bullets, and a lot of people died in that demonstrations, even though they were started as a peaceful demonstrations. And of course, that Hamas got in charge of that demonstrations a few days after, and it became a demonstration of Hamas, and everybody forgot that it began as a civil demonstration, and therefore also the public opinion in Israel viewed them, and the military harsh action followed them as an answer to Hamas and an answer to a peaceful demonstration. So yeah, I'm sorry if it wasn't focused enough.
No, I think this says a lot about the surrounding conflict. So you definitely don't see Hamas as any kind of an actual solution to Palestinian problems, as more of like a reaction to the current issues it faces.
Yeah, I think I don't think that Hamas will liberate the Palestinian people. I think the Palestinian people will liberate the Palestinian people. The organization of Hamas, sadly, part of what it's done is any organized political leadership in that range by hierarchy and have more or less, in this case, much less democratic institutes and ways to affect the leadership. It doesn't really represent a lot of Palestinians. It represents the anger of Palestinians against Israel and the feeling of reclaiming and regaining respect for the Islamic belief, which is the religious part of a struggle, of a result of a national and economic struggle in the region. And I think I don't think that any leadership, any current leadership in the whole area is going to solve this conflict, because the interests of the people aren't in the view of our mind.
What do you think would be the best solution to ending this conflict in a way that benefits the Palestinian people?
I think that I want to speak for what Israel has to do, because I don't think I have enough knowledge, or I don't know. I don't think it's fair that I will tell what the Palestinians have to do for this conflict to end. But I can say what's in my mind, what I hope Israel would do right now. And I think the ceasefire is of course the start. And sadly, it hasn't happened a week earlier when Hamas firstly asked for a ceasefire through a Russian intelligence. But ceasefire is number one. But of course, all the following actions that I will mention now wouldn't be done in the next month, or until there will be a radical shift in leadership. But there, in the last 10 years of Netanyahu's sovereignty, of Netanyahu's period in ruling Israel, that there's been a lot of swift steps that actually broke the status quo, but succeeded doing that slowly enough that we'll forget that it hasn't been part of a status quo. So the first things we need to do is to eliminate and to actually dismantle these radical fundamentalist steps, and that is repealing the national law, which was been issued a few years back, that actually claimed that Israel is is the country for Jewish people, in definition by the equivalent of what is the Constitution of the United States, but Israel has no constitution, but it has this constitutional value in court. So repealing that law will be a major step, getting the Israeli national forces out of the mosque in Jerusalem, and getting UN or not other neutral force to maintain the order in the area, without Zionist military or official officers. I think that there needs to be an eviction of the Jewish families in Sheikh Jarrah and in the neighborhoods in the east of Jerusalem that wrongfully evicted and ethnically cleansed the neighborhoods in the east of Jerusalem. I think there needs to be massive, immediate economic help, both for the West Bank and Gaza. That's been heavily hurt. I've talked about it in the last interview about the economic differences between Israel and Palestine, from the Nakba to today, which it holds a lot of national pain and symbolism, even of how Israel was founded. The vaccines, I think that Israel has to get vaccines into Gaza and into the West Bank, so that we forgot about the coronavirus in the last 2 weeks with all that situation. But first, still, yeah, you want to, sorry, Stephen?
Yeah, do you think it's important that Israel is the one to give them the vaccines, or do they just need vaccines, period?
I think that they need vaccines, period, but I know that Israel is one of the countries with greater abilities to provide Palestinians those vaccines. And the Israeli military is administering lives in the West Bank for the last 50 years. So if those forces could also give some vaccines or health services, at least, these are all really small minor steps that can build a road to negotiation, to establishing Palestinian sovereignty, to establishing an economical relief and economical reputations for the Palestinian people. And I don't want to get into 2 states, 1 state. I personally, as an anarchist, as I mostly we want to see that the Israeli state eliminated as an ethnically religious state that rates it's citizen by religion and ethnicity, and that could only really be established through one state from the river to the sea of both nationalities, of both people.
Right.
But I don't think I think that could be happen maybe just after a Palestinian state would be established as a start with a reputation. And the main thing here, I think, is economic, because it is economic, and this economic growth need to be managed, and is obvious. But we'll say it anyway. The economic building of Palestine, of the Palestinian people, need to be designed, and need to be decided, and need to be democratically decided by the Palestinian people.
Right.
Otherwise, we will get the new state won't be the successful state that Palestinians need to combat Israel, even in to have relations with Israel and to defend Palestinian lives from Israel and from Israel's workforce and capitalist system, of course.
So we talked a little bit about how political education in Israel and Palestine's severely lacking. Do you feel like that's changed throughout the conflict or since the last time we spoke? And what steps would you say need to be taken in order to increase people's political education?
I don't know. I don't think that there's been much change in political education since we last spoke. We haven't spoke a while ago. That's need to be said. But I do think that what we see here today, we saw in the last week, is an increasing and an increasing amount that haven't been seen before. This thing that a lot of Jewish radicals, a lot of Jewish anarchist, communist, left-wing activists that this time chose and were able to and wanted to arrive into Palestinian-led and organized protests in mixed city. And I speak mostly about Haifa. I was in last week in a protest in Haifa that was organized by a Palestinian organization from the city, and there has never been as many Jewish people in a Palestinian protest in Haifa. And that's exciting. It hasn't stopped the police from throwing shock grenades at us after 20 minutes of peaceful protest. And after that, because Jewish people in Israel aren't used to shock grenades being thrown at us. Yeah, we it's true. We were not used. I personally haven't seen this kind of, haven't experienced this kind of police brutality. And after the Jewish people has fled away, most of us at the beginning of police brutality, the police felt comfortable to escalate into a more dangerous, more harmful weapons for protest fleeing, protest dismantling. And but there is a growing group of Jewish activists that are willing to be a part of a clear pro-Palestinian fight and action, and there are increasing amount of Jewish people that starts to learn Arabic, and that is the answer to the question of what needs to happen for political understanding. The main barrier is the language.
Right.
If and I don't know Arabic. I'm starting now to learn Arabic. This is one of my realizations of the last 2 weeks. This is what Jewish radicals need to do, is to learn Arabic, because we don't have, I don't have even an ability to get into a Palestinian newspaper and to understand what they are reporting on. I don't understand most of my Palestinian friends' Facebook posts that highlighting Israel war crimes around the area, and we need to be exposed for that to understand and to be a part of a real coalition of Jewish and Palestinians against the end of its occupation and of this apartheid state that Israel is enacting.
So what do you think is what do you think is the status of the power to the worker union right now and other groups in the labor sector?
The power to the worker union it had been mostly busy in maintaining, in keeping the safety of the workers throughout all this, because one of the greatest, of the biggest unions inside of power to the union is the bus drivers union, and those and this union has protested and striked a lot in the last few years before, without relations to the conflict or to Jewish supremacy, about violence against bus drivers. Well, much cases of mild and severe violence against bus drivers, and in that conflict there was a strike in some point in the last 2 weeks of the bus drivers, Jewish and Arabs, that refused to drive because they were feared for their life and for the safety. There have been a lot of organizations in that union for mutual aid and personal aid between people that was in the missile range and wanted to escape from the area to the north, or to be relieved of that stress and uncertainty and unsafe situation, and that mostly of what I know that happened in power to the union, power to the workers union. Standing Together, which is the other Jewish Arab organization with direct democracy that we talked about in the last interview,
Right.
has acted a lot in the last 2 weeks, with a lot of around tens and tens of protests every day around the country, small protests, bigger protests of Jewish and Arab and Palestinian protesters together against this escalation, against the Israeli aggression, and for the end of this conflict and this round of fighting. And there was and because this is a movement and not only protests of individuals or of a spontaneous rage, there been a lot of meetings in different areas of the country of Jewish and Palestinians meeting together and speaking about how should we really protest and resist the current situation. There's been some I don't know what to call it, education meetings about how to participate in Palestinian protests, how to be a part of it, and what should we do. There's been some collaborations that grew up from these meetings. If it's explaining and building some explaining methods for youth about the situation from a leftist, a communist, socialist point of view, about understanding how to really unlearn Israel's media propaganda and way of looking at the things, and to look about it in fresh eyes and to see the situation as it is. There have been some common organizations, collaborations for guarding Palestinian areas, civil areas, by just being there, just sitting at the. We sat a lot of in the last 2 weeks, for example, in the Palestinian bar but near us, because we wanted that if some Jewish fundamentalists will come, there will be enough people in the cafe, in the bar, to defend it and to defend the property and the owners.
Is the plan to physically defend it, or is it to be there so they can't claim it was an attack against Palestinians, but also against Jewish people too?
That's not that the Jewish fundamentalists won't attack Jewish people that stand to defend Palestinians, but rather that the police will enable, as we talked earlier, will act more enabling when there is a Jewish violence against Palestinians, rather than Jewish violence against Jews and Palestinians, because firstly they fear their image, the public image, and they fear that Jewish activists in Israel, Jewish people, have more privileges than Palestinians, and they will have to explain why they haven't stopped the violence, and maybe one cop will lose his career over it, so they're more likely to react.
Okay. What do you think the chances of the ceasefire holding are going to be, and do you think you'll see more conflict soon?
I don't know actually how much this time, how much time this ceasefire will last. But I do know for certain that nothing ends here. We're stuck in the same cycle. We had 3, 4, 5 rounds of fighting exactly like that in the last 10 years. We all know how it will end every time. We all know that nothing will be accomplished every time, because there is nothing to accomplish. Israel doesn't want to occupy Gaza Strip. It doesn't want to have its citizens as citizens of Israel. They want to put a border there. And on the other hand, we don't want to free Gaza. We don't want to give Gaza an autonomy on land and sovereignty on economic factors, and to enable them building houses and having imports and exports with the world, and to engage in any economical or international activities. So until there will be some change in what Israel is allows things to happen, what Israel is allowing to be. in Israel, if Israel will want this situation to end, if this situation is ever to end, Israel have to accept that if people in Gaza doesn't going to disappear one night. We aren't going to go to sleep and wake up, and everybody that lives in Gaza will wake up in the middle of California. We're here in. We need to learn how to live together, and mostly we need people in Gaza to have a full life, to have proper civil services, proper health services, proper education, proper chances for work, and as a basis for a fulfilling human life. And when that will happen, there is nothing that should be leading to fighting, but just to developing agreements and fulfilling relationships between the people, between the countries.
Well, thank you very much, Tomar, for joining us today. I think we can say all of us here at the Trinity River Lookout and broadly the left in the United States stand with you in solidarity. We hope that peace can last for a very long time and that the situation will improve. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go today?
No, I think we covered a lot of situation. Thank you very much, Stephen, for inviting me again to take an interview. And I hope that you guys will stay safe as well and updated and fight the good fight and raise awareness for the sovereignty of Palestine and for Israeli war crimes and against Israeli nuclear capacities and weapons, because Chomsky told us that is the Biden pressure point.
Yeah, we'll have to exploit that weakness for sure. I'll be in touch. Let me know if you need anything.